Having a vision for what we do should always be guided by our why. Most of us have probably had jobs or careers over the years where we feel like we're just going through the motions and we don't really have a sense of purpose attached to what we do. When I originally spoke with my guest today, Oliver Baezner, we talked about coaching, a space that we're both connected to, but the conversation I found quickly turned into why we do what we do and not just the how. So Oliver's the founder of Sonic Breakthrough Coaching, and he spent over 25 years in leadership and management roles. And he's worked with some pretty big companies like Energizer Canada, Shoppers Drug Mart, even an NHL team, and the federal government. And he also works with business owners and entrepreneurs. And we're going to talk about why he is so passionate about the work he does. So welcome, Oliver, to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Kim. Thanks for having me here. Excited to be speaking with you today.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. I talk a lot about vision and why it's so important for leaders to step into their vision and really unpack to understand where they're going and why. And it's easy, I've found over the years, I know it's happened to me, to kind of get caught in a cycle of work that's just feels like work and it doesn't have a whole lot of meaning attached to it. And I think we're all searching for that in our own way. So I'm really thrilled to talk to you because you have had some clarifying moments over the years in defining your own why. And I really feel like, especially when I talk to you, that it's been a game changer.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I want to start there. Can you just dive in and start by telling us where the passion for helping business owners came from?
Yeah, it started when I was younger. You know, I had a mother and father who were new immigrants. I remember my dad sharing this story with me before he passed away, which was, you know, he landed in Montreal with $20 in his pocket, right, and had a profession. He was a butcher, and that's it. And then he, you know, had to kind of create a life, and you know, was an entrepreneur my entire life. Mom and dad both were, you know, in the business. They started a delicatessen in Montreal called Black Forest Delicatessen. And, you know, I didn't know we were poor. It's interesting how we sort of don't recognize that when we're kids, but, you know, we didn't have a lot of money in the beginning, right? Until sort of the business started to take off. You know, Dad had some pretty good success there. You know, he had a great reputation. He made a great product in terms of, you know, the sausages, and he was really known in the city of Montreal for the quality. And then, you know, political events happened in Quebec, and he said, you know what, I love the mountains, and so let's move to Calgary and move to Alberta, which we did. And then he tried to actually go and repeat that success. So, you know, he opened up another deli here, Mom and Dad did together, and opened up the delicatessen, same name, Black Forest Delicatessen. And it didn't go well. And eventually the business failed. And I was probably, you know, in my sort of early to mid-teens when that happened. And, you know, if you've ever met a human being who's lost all hope from a loss, that was my dad. And it impacted me tremendously because he was just a shell of himself. And that's really what sort of moved me on that trajectory of business, right? And moving forward and understanding business. So I spent, you know, a bunch of years, as you mentioned, over 25 years in corporations, helping them turn around their success. And it seemed like it was always where there was broken cultures or profitability or sales or systems missing, anything that sort of needed fixing, I was really good at. And then, you know, when I left my last corporate position, I realized, you know, I don't want to do corporate anymore. I really want to get out and, you know, have my own business, just like my dad did. So that's what sort of moved me into the whole business coaching realm. And from there, you know, I started Sonic Coaching, and, you know, we've been doing this 15 years, you know, myself and the team. And business owners, you know, when I talk to them, they're so passionate, most of them, right? When you talk to them, they, you know, either they've left a corporate job like I did, and then they go and they take maybe a second mortgage on their house or all their life savings, and they say, I'm going to go work for myself now. I'm going to have work-life balance, and I'm going to work less hours than I did corporately, and I'm going to have some success. But you and I both know the failure rate's horrific, right? It's 80% of, depending on which stat you look at, somewhere between 75 and 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. Right? And then the stat gets worse. Of the 20% that are remaining, Another 80% fail in the second 5 years. By the time we get to 15 years, less than 3% are left. And I'm going like this is wrong, right? It's just, you've put your whole life savings potentially into this business. You're working instead of 40 hours now or 50 hours, you're working 70 and 80 hours. You're an entrepreneur. We've both been there, when we're trying to build and grow our businesses. And then the failure rate is so high. And so I just didn't want that to happen to, as many business owners as I could prevent that from happening. That's my why. That's why I do what I do. And I really believe we can turn that on its head. I think we can, we can't say, unfortunately, not every business is going to make it.
Yeah.
But if we could turn that around and say 80% of businesses are going to succeed and 20 fail, that's
Yeah.
a much better stat in my mind, right? That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, and that really speaks to me because you're telling your story about your dad, and I can just, the pain involved of watching your parents fail at something that they worked so hard at and found success in the beginning. And then to see them go through that cycle. And I think you mentioned your dad passed away with this failed business. He never did recover from this. Is that correct?
No. No, he never recovered. His health deteriorated after that, and unfortunately, like I say, I mean, he wasn't the same man, right? And
Yeah.
this was my idol. This was my mentor. This was the guy I looked up to my whole life growing up, right? I was like, wow, like Dad's really done something amazing. He came with nothing and created something out of nothing, right? So to watch him sort of unfortunately pass away, with that lost hope, that was devastating to me, right? And
Absolutely.
I just don't want business owners to have that same experience. We're yes,
No.
and I've said it before, Kim. Business is simple. It's just not easy. There's steps, right? There's steps that you need to take to be successful in business,
Yeah.
but it's hard work.
Your dad clearly had success, clearly had knowledge and understanding of business and what happened. It's just unfortunate that it went that way, but I can see why you would be so passionate about helping other business owners from failing because the failure rate is so high. Did you struggle with your why as you were going through your professional journey? When you spent all those years in corporate and leadership, was there a wrestling that went on at that time of your life?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I haven't thought about this in a few years now, but yeah, it kind of brings me back to, I left corporate. So, when I left corporate, I was VP of Sales and Marketing at the time at Big Rock Brewery here in Calgary, and at the time, there was an opportunity to move on. We'd kind of done what we needed to do, and as a turnaround sort of specialist or expert, once things were done and fixed, I usually get a little bit, used to get a little bit bored and move on, right? Go find another challenge.
I can relate.
And
Yes.
exactly. So, but yeah, so when I left, I decided I was going to buy a business. I was going to become an entrepreneur. And then 2000, so I left in 2008, probably beginning of the year, late 2007, 2008. And then in 2008, as you know, the world came to an end on the stock market, right? So to speak,
Yeah.
right? Everything collapsed, and it started in the US and hit us globally. And there weren't a lot of jobs out there. So, I was going to look for work. And then what am I going to do now? I couldn't find a business that sort of fit what I was looking for. Coaching found me, actually, and I was struggling with my why big time at that time. I call it I remember a really great pastor here in Calgary. I remember him saying, you're in liminality, and I went, liminality, interesting. And so he explained that liminal time is kind of when we're in that in between space, right? So we don't know what the go forward plan is, but we know the go backward plan, or the past is over, and then there's no way to go back, right? And I was there. I probably was there for a good year, right? And you've heard of Dark Night of the Soul. That's what it felt like, right? And so, kind of stumbling around a little bit, trying to figure out what I wanted to be if and when I grew up, and coaching found me. One day I was, but this was back, again, if we go back in '08, newspapers were, not as online as they are today. And I was flipping through the newspaper one day, and there was an article, not an ad, but an article about a coaching franchise. And so I, reached out and bought the franchise. And the reason I did that was I had hired a coach when I was actually in one of my corporate positions for my team. I had 3 relatively new district managers at the time reporting to me. I couldn't support them. There was just so much on the go. I was constantly on an airplane, flying to different parts of the country, helping kind of restructure and fix things. So I
Hmm.
got on the phone with the coach, and then he would work with my district managers, getting everybody to pull in the same direction. And so I knew about coaching. I always thought that sounds like a great profession. When I, talked to the coach, I bought the franchise. That's how it all started. And I haven't looked back since. It was a great decision. So yeah, I struggled with my why. It was like, why, what am I going to do? Why am I, not finding the right business? All those questions we go through
Mm.
when we're, in the depths of, trying to figure things out. But as soon as that coaching kind of hit, it was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I tell
You just
everybody,
knew.
I knew, and I tell everybody I got to practice corporately for over 25 years to kind of do
Mm.
what I do now to help business owners, right? There isn't too much I haven't seen in my career. I'm not, not as a business coach, but as a turnaround expert, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, in corporations, right? When
Yeah.
you've helped fix culture and profitability and systems, there isn't too much you haven't come across, right? So,
Oh,
I
for
always
sure.
say if I can help, a multi-million dollar company turn around their profitability, I can help a business owner with their challenges.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We
I
see,
want to, sorry, I was going to say, I want to focus on something you said because I think this is the place where a lot of people find themselves stuck. And when you were mentioning that place, and what was the word you used? That place that you found yourself in.
liminality. Yeah, I found
Yes.
myself in liminality, right? You can look, I looked it up afterwards, like, what does this word mean exactly? But it
It's
is,
not a word that I typically hear
no,
for sure.
no. And when Dr. Clyde Glass, who's just an amazing human being here in Calgary, when he shared that, right, and it was like, yeah, I'm in between, or you could go this way, right? I can't go, I like this way because I can't go back, but I don't know the go forward plan. But it can be a dark time. I mean, I remember thinking like, man, how am I going to support my family? Like, I've got to figure this out,
Yeah,
really,
because
and
there's realities attached here. Like
totally,
there's some real things. You have a family to support. You have just there's just so many things riding on this. But I wanted to go there because that's exactly where I found myself as well.
yes,
So I relate to that so deeply, and I find people that I work with as well are in that place. It's this kind of this black hole or vortex, and I've found that as hard as that place is, and I'm speaking for myself here,
yeah,
as hard as that place has been, that's the place that I really think is so important. It's where you discover who you are, and it's really how you discover your why and connecting with those things. And it doesn't necessarily come right away. And that's why it's a wrestle, is because it's not an overnight process. At least I
no.
didn't find it was. It was, everybody's journey through that space is a little different, even time wise. But it's in that wrestle, it's in that incubation phase of, it's almost like the caterpillar and butterfly. It's
Yeah.
in that time of, yeah, I know I can't go back. I just
And it
know I can't go back to where I've been, but I don't know where I'm going.
and it doesn't feel good all often, right?
Not
Like
at all.
for most people, it doesn't feel good. I mean, I know. I mean, I know your story as well. You're a single mom, and how do you support, your child and yourself?
Yeah.
And it's not a fun space, but you're right. I like how you sort of said that's the incubator, right?
Yeah.
That's where things start to percolate. That's life has to sometimes slow us down in order to show us a direction, right? Or give us an intuition or an inkling,
Yeah.
and hopefully, it's not as long as mine was, which was about a year, but it can be, right?
I think mine was longer. It was probably a couple of years, believe it or not, and maybe I had other things packed in there too, but I just want to give somebody listening hope that maybe if you're in that black hole and that space, it's a season. It doesn't last forever. There is another side to this. There is coming out of it, and sometimes yielding to the process of going through the really difficult moments of figuring yourself out and why you are the way you are and how you tick and what your all your abilities are and what you can connect that to in life is a game changer. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and
Um
let me, if it's okay with you, let me add a little bit of a
ah
tool here for people as well. So if you're right now in that space of not, it doesn't feel good, it's that liminal space, in between space, or you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. One of the things that I've worked with now for years with both my corporate clients and our entrepreneur clients is, and it sounds so simple, so people dismiss it, but like honestly, they have to do this, is gratitude journal. Right? They have to start,
Yeah.
if you're in gratitude, you can't be in despair. If you're in gratitude, you can't be feeling depressed. If you're in gratitude, you can't be feeling hopeless. Right? And so, I always say to my clients, I say, okay, you're starting a gratitude journal. I want you to put it on the pillow on your bed. And before you go to bed at night, a minimum, you've got to have 3, right? I want you to have 3 things that you're grateful for, and just 3. Right now, some days you'll have 6, and go ahead and write them down. And the funny thing is, we use colored pens, right, in our workshops, and it's kind of our branding here. And
Yeah.
I'll usually give them a pen with the 4 colors, and they'll go, "I haven't seen that since I was a kid," right? And
It's true.
it's got the 4 colors, but it's also it makes it a little more fun, right? So when you're
Mhm.
writing the gratitude journal, change the colors. So I'll give you an example. I went through a very, very difficult divorce about 12 years ago.
Mm.
It was another one of those growth moments for me.
Yeah.
And and I remember one night just thinking, "Oh my God, like life sucks, right? This is horrible, right?" Feeling sorry for myself. And I had the gratitude journal. Like I said, I put it on my pillow, right? It's there. And so I couldn't forget. And I went, I don't want to write my gratitude journal, but the one thing, that I do have is I have discipline, right? And so I opened it up and I went, okay, what am I going to write? So I remember the 3 things I wrote down, Kim, that day, that night. And it was, I'm grateful the sun was up today. So I had some sunshine on me. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for the chocolate bar I had a few hours ago, and I'm grateful I get to climb in the warm bed. I mean, that's as good as it got, right? I mean, there was probably a thousand things I could have been grateful for, but when you're in that deep, dark space, sometimes you
Yeah.
can't see it. But I'll tell you something. I remember when I laid down that night thinking, wow, I don't feel as down as I did. I'm actually feeling pretty positive. And the other bonus is, I mean, science has already told us that now your subconscious is percolating on the positives instead of the negativity, right? And instead of,
Yeah.
don't go to bed watching the news, right? Nothing wrong with being caught up on what's going on in the world, but don't do it right before you go to bed at 11 o'clock or 10
No.
o'clock at night, right? Percolate on the positives. So there's a tool. Somebody struggling right now. I mean, I'll tell you, it sounds so simple, but it's the simple things that really work.
I love that. I love that there's a tool that you've just introduced, and somebody listening might think, well, that sounds really simple, and gratitude journal, that sounds a little fluffy to me.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100%. I have done this myself. Gratitude is one of these secret weapons, I'm going to call it, to getting out of that place. And I dare somebody to try it. If you have not, I actually dare you to try it, because as simple as that sounds, it's transforming. So there you go. We've already dared somebody on the podcast here today.
Well, it changes people's lives. It really, I've
It
watched
does.
people, transform out of the darkness and the negativity. And, I could share story after story, right? It works.
Yeah. So how important, and this might seem like a silly question almost with the conversation we've had so far, but how important is it for somebody to do this work and find something that lights you up in what you're doing?
Oh, it's not important at all, Kim. I'm just kidding. Of course, that's, that's the foundation, right? So I'm glad you asked that question. We really should talk about it. The one thing that is not going to light you up, the one thing that is not going to keep you trudging through the difficult times, and believe me, you're going to have peaks and you're going to have valleys, right?
Yeah.
And that is having a strong passion or a strong really wanting to do this, right? So if you're just out there, and I've talked to entrepreneurs who said, I got into this business because I can make a lot of money. That's not enough. It's
It
never
really
enough,
isn't.
right? It sounds like it is when you don't have any, right? But it's not enough, right? I can tell you, I had a corporate position years ago where they could have doubled my salary. And I was making a 6-figure salary at the time, right? But they could have doubled my salary and I
Hmm.
wasn't staying. And when it's painful, money is not the motivator, right?
No.
So what lights you up? So let's use you and I as the example, because what lights
Hmm.
us up obviously is to serve and to coach and to mentor and to be helpful to to those people that need it. In my world, it's the business owners,
Hmm.
right? And so so let's say you've got that passion, right? So great. So now you've got a passion, right? Now you've got to find a way to actually turn that into a business. So if you've got a passion right now, the first thing I would say is do some market research. is there even a market for what you're trying to do? Because sometimes there isn't, right? I've
That's
seen
right.
entrepreneurs have these great ideas, but it's like, okay, have you even checked if there's, people are willing to pay you for this? And then they realize they're
So
not, right?
important. That's an important
Absolutely.
piece of the puzzle for sure.
Right. So, I mean, if you're a plumber, electrician, you're a lawyer, of course there's a need for your service, right? So we
Yeah.
already know that. But if you've got something unique, you've got to go do some market research, ask some people, right? And go out there and say, hey, man, what would you pay for this? So that's the first thing. So if you've got a passion, make sure there's a market for it. And then you've got to take the steps to create a proper business, right? And so, I always say if you can find somebody that to mentor you, whether it's a mentor,
Yeah.
this isn't your spouse, folks, right? Like your spouse loves you, and they're gonna say, this is amazing, and they're gonna support you. But spouses can't even coach each other, even if they have the business experience.
That's
I've
so
seen it
true.
blow
You
up.
need somebody to ask you the tough questions, right?
Absolutely. And you're going to get mad at your spouse, right? I remember I had a husband and wife, business owners walk into my office a few years ago, right? And you could tell they'd been, bickering a little bit, right? And then so we talked about their business challenge. And then, it's funny, the husband looks at her and goes, how come when he tells you, you listen to him? I just said that in the car and you didn't hear me. And I looked at him and said, first of all, you cannot coach each other, right? So you're not going to
All
hear
of
it,
us have
right?
tried.
Exactly. It doesn't work, right? So find that mentor, find that coach. And by the way, I'm talking about a 10x increase in potential success by doing this. This is massive, right?
Mm,
Like finding the right mentor, the right coach, the right somebody who's gone there before you. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Somebody's already
yeah.
invented it and found a formula,
And there's
right? And
blind
of
spots, right, that we all
course,
have and we can't see. And to have somebody along the journey with us is a
yeah.
game changer.
My game changer was I bought a franchise, right? I mean, I knew how to help businesses. I knew how to ask the questions to find out what the challenges were.
Hmm.
What I didn't have was a step-by-step methodology at the time, right, to take you through. So I bought the franchise because, I didn't have 2 years to go create all that. And so,
Right.
so that became, they became the ones who guided me, and I have no regrets. I mean, the franchise was fantastic, right? And I stayed in it for about 2.5 years and before we created the Sonic coaching brand.
Yeah,
And
you just needed
so,
a bit of foundation there, but you
yeah,
went on to create something that was uniquely you.
exactly. But I had those mentors in the case, and I paid for that, right? I had those
Yeah.
mentors, those guides that could help me get to the next level a lot quicker. And they did. I'll be honest with you, without the franchise, I'm not sure I'd be sitting here with you today, right? I would have
Mm,
probably given up sooner and gone back to a corporate job. Those were easy. I knew how to do those, right? But when
yeah.
you leave a corporate environment, I had a company car, I had an expense account, I had great benefits, I had a great salary, right? It's easy to go back to those things when you're going, oh man, I don't even have anybody I can hand this to help print this stuff out for me, right? So
Well, and you start daydreaming about those times, right? When you're
exactly.
in it and you are in it thick and you don't have the answers and you keep thinking about that expense
Yeah.
account and that car
And
and
and the other reason you
yeah.
do it, Kim, is because you're probably a great technician. You're probably excellent. Well, if you're not excellent, then you need to question why you're even doing it. But
Mm,
let's say you're an excellent plumber, you're an excellent electrician, you're an excellent lawyer. Now you're going to start your own practice, your own business, right? And so the first thing that you want to sort of consider is you're an expert technician, but you're not an expert business owner in that discipline,
yeah. Very
right?
different.
Very different. So that's where you take those steps, you take your passion and you start to put it on paper and you start creating a plan and then you run it by somebody who can say, that's not a great plan. I had a client who was gonna, looking to buy a franchise a number of years ago. And we sat across the table and I said, okay, well, that's great. Bring me the financial statements for our next meeting,
Mhm.
for this franchise. So she brought me the financials and what this looked like. And it took me 5 minutes. I literally slid the deck across. She'll admit this. We laugh about it now, right? I slid the deck back across the desk and said, you know, I can't recommend you buy this franchise. It's a terrible business model. I said, but I can tell by the glimmer in your eyes. So back to that passion question,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
you're going to do this whether I recommend it or not. So if you're going to do it, then let's make sure we work together so I can help you make this profitable. And it was, they still own the franchise and they've done very, very well. So
Isn't that
That's how you take
interesting?
passion and turn it into a business.
Uh, the mentorship is a huge piece. I just think you've touched on something that is absolutely critical as many of us are building our businesses. And when you mix all those pieces together and having somebody on the journey and not just a yes person, but somebody who's going to tell you the cold, hard truth, whether you like to hear it or not, then it's up to you to take that advice and that guidance. And yeah, you may even go in a different direction, but there's truth and wisdom in those times, and it's all playing a factor into your success at the end of the
Yeah.
day. I want to maybe shift gears a little bit, but obviously
Sure.
talking around what we're talking about here with vision and our why and why it's so important. But when you work with leaders and even as yourself, there's so many distractions out there right now that are kind of disrupting our why and our vision and how we're moving forward and able to move forward. And there's a lot of noise. How in the world do you stay focused on what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, and how do you send that message to people that you work with to stay the course and to keep everything at bay that doesn't need to be there?
Yeah, great question. I mean, we could spend probably another 2 hours on this one, Kim. So,
No
let me
doubt.
try and digest it down to just some of the few of the basics. So, there are a lot of things, and I joke about it with business owners, right? Is you wear 40 hats, right? You're the marketing guy, you're the sales guy,
Mm-hmm.
you're sweeping the floors if you've got a storefront, you're stocking the shelves, you're doing it all, right?
Yeah.
And so what you have to remember is, first of all, you have to get in some kind of a routine and have discipline. Brian Tracy, the speaker who's now pretty much retired, said, one of the number one secrets of success is having self-discipline, right? If you don't have the discipline
Yeah.
to do the hard stuff and to keep going, because you've got that strong why in place and that passion, you're not going to make it. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, and again, as I say, business is simple. It's not easy. There's really only two things as a new business owner or as a business owner solopreneur that you need to do. There's only two things that are really, really important. And so the first one is get the work and deliver on the work.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right? Get the business and do the business, right? Now that I know people
That's
who are
so
listening and say,
simple.
I'm way oversimplifying it, but that's the bottom line. What are
Yeah.
you focusing on? Let me give you a quick example. Years ago when I got started, remember I said I didn't have an assistant. I didn't have, I had nothing, right? When I started my business. And so, but I found I was swamped in a lot of the work, and we were sending out a newsletter at the time. So I had to create the newsletter and print the newsletter and stuff the envelopes. But I had a 12-year-old at the time, right?
Mm.
And he was getting at that time, this was a few years back now, he was getting $10 a month for allowance. Right. And so I said to him, I said, Thomas, like if I show you how to print and kind of, fold correctly, because I had a certain way, and stuff these envelopes with our newsletter, could you do this for me? And I'll pay you $10 an hour. And he said, sure, Dad, I'll
Wow.
help you
That's a
out.
lot of
Right.
money for that age. Yes.
Oh yeah, and this was quite a few years ago when minimum
Yeah.
wage, wasn't, where we are today. So it took him 3 hours, and the thing was, it was instant gratification for him. So I opened my wallet, I give him $30. He goes, "Oh, thanks so much, Dad. Do you have anything else for me to do?" "Not right now, son." Now here's what happens, right? So did I have, could I afford to spend $30 on that? Probably not, business wise, right? But it
Mm-hmm.
made sense because in that $30 spend, what I did is what most people would do. Okay, great. Now I can get caught up on emails. Now I can get the paperwork cleaned off my desk.
Yeah.
No, I had 3 hours I just gained. What I did is I went out to get the work. I started to phone people. I started to have coffees, and I started to go out there and network and meet folks and going to get the business. You know
Yeah.
what? The emails and all that other stuff didn't need to be done with my free not three, it cost me $30, but almost free 3 bonus hours. No, I always say if you don't have somebody who can help you, find a 12-year-old who's smart and willing and able, right?
There's
So
12-year-olds all over the place. We just
now
need to
let's say
round them
you've
up.
already
Yeah.
had your business a while, and you've got a small team, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now the two most important, again, business is simple, not easy. The two most important things you need to do is support your team so that you can get the success. So if you've got a business development person and maybe somebody to do some of the technical work for you, a plumber or an electrician,
Mm-hmm.
right? Support the team so they can be successful, remove any roadblocks to their success, and get the work done. That's it. It's still two things. And then the other stuff, yes, you've got to get those things done, But if you're not doing those first two, you're not making any money. Years ago, I've coached coaches as well over the
Right.
years, and I was coaching a coach, and we were talking, and I said, "So how are you doing? You've been doing this for 6 months?" And he told me he had one client, and it was not, he wasn't making a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was so busy. He said, "I'm going to go get another certification." Well, 17 certifications or 3 certifications isn't
Yeah.
going to get you clients. So I refocused him completely. We developed a plan so that he could go out and get the work and do the work. That's it.
How much of that, boy, do I hear what you're saying. And I found myself in the beginning kind of going through those motions too. And we're trying, for me, it was just defaulting back to things that were comfortable. Because
Yes.
for me, going forward, getting clients and getting out of my comfort zone, that didn't feel really good in the moment. So I'll just
Yeah.
work on this. This I can handle right now. And it kind of
Yeah.
derailed me. And I quickly realized, well, that isn't going to make me successful.
No.
It's that discipline, like you said.
Well,
So,
and if I can jump in, Kim, because
yes.
I think we need to talk about this. I think it's so important, especially in today's world, right? And so let's talk about mental toughness,
Yep.
right? It takes mental toughness to be an entrepreneur. It takes toughness to be a leader in a corporation, and it takes mental toughness to show up for work every day and be a great employee. Everybody, COVID showed us one thing, that is that a lot of us are struggling. And I actually interviewed Dr. Ryan Todd here, who's a psychiatrist here in Calgary a few months
Mm-hmm.
ago, and he said, I don't know, a lot of people may not know this, but the Spanish flu was exactly almost 100 years ago from COVID. So it was about 100, just over 100 years ago, they had the Spanish flu. And here, 100 years later, we have COVID. And during the Spanish flu, what they found was there was an echo, he called it an echo pandemic of mental health challenges for 6 to 7 years. We're in an
Mm,
echo pandemic right now of mental health challenges. So let's talk
absolutely.
about mental toughness and our ego, because our ego tries to take us out, right? And ego, often I ask people, so what's the job of the ego? And they don't know, right? Like
Yeah.
once in a blue moon in an audience, somebody will take a guess and get it right. But the job of the ego, and I'll give your audience a sec to think about it. What is your ego's job? What's it supposed to do? We know that the ego is an overactive nervous system, right?
Hmm.
So what's its job?
When I think of ego, I think it's protecting me. It's
Yeah,
protecting me from what's
I
out there.
know. Great job. Yeah, I can tell you've done a lot of work, right? You
Hmm.
understand these concepts, right? So, but the ego's job is to protect you. You're absolutely right. Now, the challenge is when we kind of dive into emotions, there's only two emotions, right?
Hmm.
When we have fear on the one side, which is depression, anger, sadness, all those things that go with fear. And on the other side, we have love, right?
Yeah,
Now, I'm not talking about that romantic love. I'm talking about love for humanity, right? Love for
that's
self,
right.
right? And so that's where joy, excitement, gratitude, all those things fall under there. Well, ego is always looking for danger. That's how we're wired. I mean, our
Yeah.
ancestors had to outrun saber-toothed tigers, right? So I don't know about you, but I haven't had to outrun one of those in a long time. So
No,
um,
thankfully.
exactly. So what happens is our ego's looking for danger from a fear-based place, which is the
Yeah.
wrong perspective. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. If your ego says, "Hey, there's two guys with dark jackets and they look kind of, unsavory down that alley, run like
Hmm.
hell," do what it says, right? It is
Yep.
right some of the time, right? But most of the time, it's saying inside voice, right? It's saying, "Kim, why do you think you can host a podcast? Like, you don't have any experience. And Kim, do you even know enough to do this? Kim, it's much safer to go back and find a job," right? That's the inside voice. That's our ego trying to protect us.
All of those thoughts have come through my head.
Absolutely.
It's
For
like you
all
knew
of
that.
us.
Yeah.
Right? So when we fail at business, it's not because we fail at business, it's because we failed at the mastery of our emotions, the mastery of our mental health, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so the ego goes traditionally to four places. And I'll go on real quickly for your audience here. So we play the
Hmm.
blame game. We blame other people, other things, other circumstances, right? So
Yep.
so blaming is the first way the ego tries to take us out. How do we counter that? Take 100% responsibility for your life, right? I didn't say 50%. By the way, if and I know you're married, right? It's not you're 50% responsible and your husband's 50% responsible. You're each 100% responsible to make that relationship work,
Correct.
right? So that's how you overcome the blame game, right? You don't do
Yeah.
this. you do this, you take 100% responsibility. Second place is judging or on a high horse. Now, we all do it, right? Every one of us goes to these places, right? Right? I usually joke with my audiences, right? When I'm speaking to an audience, I go, every one of you judged me before I even came, as I came up here, right? You judged me, hey, the guy's beard is too white, and I don't know that I like that color on him. Oh, and look at those shoes, right? And then a whole 100% of the audience goes to look at my shoes, right? And so we're judging all the time, right? So how do we get over that? By showing respect and no negative comments. By the way, gossiping is death, as far as I'm concerned, right? It is
I
not
couldn't agree
productive.
more.
It is not healthy. It is, that is judging on steroids, so to speak, right? So we don't judge anymore. Like we say, you know what? They're doing the best they can. Let me give you an example. Had a lawyer partner in a law firm I was working with a few years ago, and going through a very, very difficult divorce. And one day I said to him, look, I know things are tough. I've been through it myself. I had total empathy for the man, right? And I said, but your wife is doing the best she can. And he went off on me. He said, no, she's not. There's no way. And blah, blah, blah. And he went on and on. 7 months later, he emailed me and he said, you know what? And I don't know what the circumstances were, but he emailed me because he felt I needed to know. He said, I realized today that you were absolutely right. She was doing the best she can. She just wasn't doing the best I thought she could. So just remember that if people could be doing better, they would be, right? So
It's that perspective. It's just a perspective shift.
Totally. And then the third one is being defensive, right? So, put the wall up, get defensive. The minute the wall's up, you're not hearing anything, right? So you have to start looking at it as feedback as a gift. When I give feedback, and believe me, I tell my clients things sometimes they don't want to hear, but I'll say to them, let's say you and I are working together, Kim, I'll say, Kim, there's something I've noticed that, you're probably not going to want to really hear, but I think it's so important for your success.
Yeah.
And so are you okay if I share that? Now, I asked the client that one day and I timed it. It was a minute. He sat there for a minute without saying a word, right? And I just waited, right? So I'm comfortable with silence. We can stop talking here for 10 minutes. I'd be comfortable, right? But and so finally he says, okay, fine. I said, no, you're not ready. When you're ready, you let me know, right? And then he went, okay, you're right. Okay, share it with me. That's how you share feedback. You don't just go download on people. You get their permission. You come from a place of kindness and love and respect, and you share the feedback. And
then being on the receiving end of that, what do you hear? Like I'm thinking being in that hot seat, am I hearing, well, you're going to hear some things you don't want to hear, or am I hearing, this is going to help you in growth and moving forward and actually succeeding? I heard the latter.
Exactly. You're on the other end. You might not be hearing anything if I let your wall go up, right? So the first thing we have to do is make sure your wall is down, right? Now, the fourth one is being right, right? So, and by the way, everybody has kind of their favorite one here as you're listening. So think about that, right? And I have, this is my favorite. I love to be right, right? I'm never wrong, therefore I'm always right, right? I joke about it. And so, but here's the thing, right? There's a few sayings out there. You can be right or you can be rich. You can be right or you can be happy. You can be right or you can be married, right? So when we're right, we're not open to creativity. We're not open to new ideas. We're not open to people's suggestions and thoughts and their passions, right? So so just release that need to be right. And so that's how our ego takes us out. Yesterday I was talking to a CEO of a very large company here in Calgary, right? And one of the things that one of the questions that sort of got asked was, and this comes up with my clients all the time, is that whole imposter syndrome, that whole, do I deserve to be here, right? Like, and again, ego trying to take us out, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a group of us sitting there, and I said, okay, show of hands, who's ever had imposter syndrome? 100% of hands went up. And every time I do this in an audience, unless people don't want to raise their hand, they're all raising their hands, right?
That's right.
And so we've all had that little voice in our head that says, I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know if I know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I deserve to be doing this, right? So mental toughness is so critical. So here's the thing. We have 60 to 65,000 thoughts per day. That's what science tells us. Of those, 95% are repetitive and 80% are negative. Back to the gratitude journal. Back to,
exactly.
not letting our ego take over. Back to seeing the passion and moving forward. Hopefully that's helpful.
It's incredibly helpful. It's really gold what you just shared. And I think just going and unpacking those points is a game changer for anybody listening. There's a lot packed in there, but I think it all starts up here in our heads
Always.
and that mental space. And right now, in the world we live in and some of the things we've been through, collectively, globally over the past few years has really challenged us in this area. And I think we're in a bit of a new place in all of our journeys with the uncertainty of where
Yeah.
we're at in life, in business, in families. And I think if there was ever a more important time to make sure that you are strong mentally, emotionally, physically, like all those areas, paying attention to those things in your life, it's now, because
Yeah.
there are challenges that are staggering in many people's lives. But the ones that are overcoming are the ones that are doing the work and disciplined enough to do the work and are not giving up and finding a way to not give up. So that's who is going to endure and is going to make a
Yeah.
difference going forward. And I'm so excited for that because that's what it's all about. We're built to be for tough. We're built to overcome. So
Yes.
we're just finding those ways to do it. And I love that we're discussing.
But, but we're not built to be divisive, and we're not built
That's
to
right.
hate each other, and we're not built to let our ego take over, right? That's how we're not built, right?
You're
So
right.
we need to take those four, four main patterns that our ego shows up as, and we need to realize that's us. That's
That's
not the other
right.
person, right? And
Yeah,
I know we're running out of time, but if it's okay with you, I'd love to leave one sort of final thought with your
absolutely.
listeners, right? And so, and I can't take credit for this. I chair a forum here in Calgary with some senior VPs and some CEOs, and I'm the chair in the room. And this formula came from McKay CEO forums, and and it's this. It's if you want to be happy, your life circumstances have to equal your expectations. Now, let me unpack that really quickly. If your
Mm,
life circumstances don't equal your expectations, you're not happy, right? So, how do you fix it? Well, let's start on the E side, on the expectation side, right? So, how do we change our expectations? Well, it's our thoughts, right? Like we have to change the way we think about things, and the late Dr. Wayne Dyer said it best. He says, if we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change. That's what we're
yeah,
talking about on the expectation piece, right? Change
yeah.
how you look at that situation, that human being, that whatever that problem is. Right now, on the other side, we've got our life circumstances. So, how do we change our life circumstances? Well, Psychology Today a few years ago did an article saying everything that happens to us on the outside in terms of our circumstances happens first on the inside as thoughts, right? So how do we fix the life circumstance side? It's the same thing. We have to change our thoughts, change our thinking, change our subconscious patterns that are going on, right? So if you want to be happy, change either the life circumstances or the expectations or a little of
Hmm.
each, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that formula that can transform people's lives, right? If you're not happy, and here's my challenge to your listeners: if you're struggling right now and there's something big that you're really challenged with, I want you to write down life circumstances equal expectations. And I want you to think about what you're going to do on those two sides of the formula to turn it around.
And you can start with baby steps,
Totally.
right? You can start small. We're talking about big things here. We're talking, it can be big, but you can start by taking that one tiny step today, and that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. So
So,
back to business.
yeah.
If your business isn't going well, right, then, life circumstances, business circumstances equal expectations. If your business isn't meeting your expectations, what's a couple of steps you can take? Well, first of all, maybe you need to adjust your expectations. You're not going to be at $1 million in revenue in a year. It doesn't usually happen, right? But so change that. But on the life circumstances, what's one step I can take? Just one thing today to move my business forward. Who can I have
Yeah.
coffee with? Who should I reach out to? Who can I ask to mentor me? And that could
Yeah.
change your life completely. The final sort of tidbit I want to leave you, it was, I've been doing this now 15 years. And, my mom, who loves me dearly, before she passed away last year, she loved me dearly. For years, she would say, shouldn't you just go back at a corporate job? It's so much safer. Remember, she had some, what I call
Yes.
PTSD from the
Yeah.
failure of their own business, right? So she was really scared I was going to fail. And then it was about 2 years ago, so about a year before she passed away, Mom looked at me, she says, I wish there would have been somebody around like you when we had our business, because things
Oh,
might have turned
wow.
out different. It was like, oh my God, mom got it, right? And so thank you, mom. And, thank you to your listeners. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much. It was really, really enlightening. I think there's a lot to unpack here. And if you're interested in learning more about what Oliver and his team does at Sonic Coaching, I'll have more information up on the website and in the show notes, so you can check that out there. And Oliver, it's been a pleasure. Your story is so inspirational. I know we'll stay connected, and all success in the future to you.
Thanks so much, Kim. Thanks for having me. And, thank you to your listeners.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you soon.
Take care.